Okay, so this would be the last activity, activity 14, which would deal about toxicology class. So the analysis, so let's in toxicology, let's start first with the analysis of alcohols. So there are four major types of alcohols class that we will discuss. We have your ethanol, your methanol, your isopropanol, and your ethylene glycol. Now, alcohols class in general are the CNS depressants. So when you say CNS depressants, they weaken nervous stimuli. So kapag weak yung nervous stimuli mo, you tend to have a slower reaction time. You tend to have diminished motor skills. So, di ba pag nalalasing tayo, class, we tend to have a slower reaction time, mas mabagal tayo kumilos, then mas mabagal tayo mag-react. Now, exposure to alcohol could lead to disorientation, confusion, and euphoria. So, most people would drink alcohol to forget about their problems and to experience euphoria. Now, if you take too much alcohol, class, it could lead to unconsciousness or yung blackout na tinatawag nila, paralysis, and worst case, if you overdose, if you have a very large amount of alcohol, katulad nito, class, 0.35 to 0.50% weight per volume ng alcohol, it could lead to coma and possible death. So the reference range of alcohol in our body is of course 0 milligram per DL, since it is not produced in the body. Toxic levels, class, are greater than 50 milligram per DL. Now, I want you to memorize this table, class. Tinatanong to sa board exam. The stages of impairment by alcohol. So we have the blood alcohol level in percent weight per volume and their signs and symptoms. So if you have around 0.01 to 0.05 blood alcohol level, you would have no obvious impairment. Some changes are observable on performance testing. Excuse me. Then if you have 0.03 to 0.12 blood alcohol level, you would suffer from mild euphoria, decreased inhibitions, some impairment of motor skill. Then if you have 0.09 to 0.25 blood alcohol level, this would lead to decreased inhibition, loss of critical judgment, memory impairment, diminished reaction time. Then if you have 0.18 to 0.30 class, it would lead to mental confusion, dizziness, strongly impaired motor skills. So yung part dyan, class, na tipsy ka, yung tipsy na tinatawag nila is around siguro yung 0.09 to 0.25. And then kapag naman 0.27 to 0.40, yan na yung lasing ka talaga. You would be unable to stand or walk. You would vomit and you would have impaired consciousness. And worst case, yung sabi ko nga kanina, if you have a blood alcohol level of 0.35 to 0.50, it could lead to coma and possible death. So let's start first with the first type of alcohol, yung ethanol class. Now, ethanol is commonly known as your grain alcohol. Kasi most of the time, your ethanol is taken from grains class. Yung barley, yung ginagawang malt, ganun. They are extracted from grains like sugar grains, wheat grains, etc. Now, it would lead to diuresis and acidosis. So, kapag may diuresis ka, class, di ba, you would have increased urine output. So, ihi ka ng ihi. So, the reason for this is due to the inhibition of the hormone ADH or vasopressin, which is responsible for the control of water that leaves the body. So, you would often urinate, class, when you drink alcohol. Acidosis would be due to the accumulation of lactic acid and ketones from alcohol. So, what are the symptoms if you have too much ethanol, class? You would have blurred vision, incoordination, slurred speech, and coma. Hangover symptoms would occur, class, in the morning. So, di ba kapag may hangover ka, ang pinaka-common symptom ng hangover is that you would suffer from a headache. And then sometimes you would forget what happened the previous night or when you went out drinking. So the reference range for ethanol is 0 to 10 milligram per DL. If you have greater than 10 milligram per DL, you are legally intoxicated. So kapag legally intoxicated class, you are considered under the influence of alcohol. And isa sa mga batas, one of the rules or one of the laws in our country and even in the United States class is that you are not allowed to DUI. So when you say DUI, driving under influence of alcohol, driving under influence of drugs. So this is the most common cause of car accidents in the US and even in the Philippines class. Authorities would test their blood alcohol level, and if it is greater than 10 milligram per DL, it is considered DUI and legal cases can be fined. So pwede kang makulong class. Toxic levels class could lead to further complications. If the patient is a non-hemodialysis, it would be greater than 400 milligram per DL. Pero kapag yung patient nyo may hemodialysis or nag-undergo ng dialysis, the toxic level is greater than 500 milligram per DL. Then we have your methanol. Now, methanol class is commonly known as your wood alcohol. So this is usually before it was formed from the distillation of wood. But now, class, ang methanol nyo is synthetically made from chemicals. So ito yung flammable na type of alcohol class. So this is used as a laboratory solvent. Methanol is the alcohol used to check for chemical reactions. It is a contaminant in homemade liquors. So symptoms of methanol intoxication would include blindness, metabolic acidosis. So the fatal dose of methanol is 60 to 250 ml, and reaching these levels mean that the person could die. Toxic level is greater than 50 milligram per DL. Then at this level, the person starts experiencing signs and symptoms of too much methanol in the blood. Then we have your isopropanol and ethylene glycol. So si isopropanol class is also known as your isopropyl alcohol or yung rubbing alcohol. So symptoms of intoxication would be CNS depression and hypertension or high blood. Indication of toxicity class is increased acetone. Kaya mataas yung acetone mo class because when your isopropanol is broken down, dinidestroy siya, it leaves a metabolite and the metabolite is acetone. The fatal dose of isopropanol is 250 ml. So kung gusto mong suffer ng ganitong symptoms, you need to drink 250 ml class ng isopropyl alcohol. Then we have your ethylene glycol. So yung ethylene glycol class is found in hydraulic fluid and antifreeze substances. So symptoms of intoxication is metabolic acidosis, depressed reflexes, anuria, or you're no longer able to urinate. Wala nang lumalabas na ihi. Then necrosis or tissue death. Fatal dose is 100 gram per ml. Now, when it comes to ethylene glycol poisoning class, the commonly affected, yung pinaka-common victim nila are usually children. The reason why class is because yung ethylene glycol has a characteristic sweet taste and smell. So kapag nalasahan niya ng bata, they would consider it as something delicious kasi matamis siya, amoy matamis, so they would continuously take it hanggang sa ma-poison sila. Now, in relation to your AUBF in clinical microscopy, the presence of Caox crystals. So kapag madami kang Caox, if you have increased Caox crystals in your urine, most likely the patient has ethylene glycol poisoning. Now, what are the patient preparation, specimen type collection, and storage when it comes to alcohol class? So the specimen would include serum, plasma, whole blood, and urine. The best specimen class is whole blood. Capillary or arterial blood can be used to determine alcohol level in the brain. So you would use capillary class or arterial blood if you want to determine if the central nervous system is already affected by the alcohol. Then the venipuncture site must be cleaned with alcohol-free disinfectant. This could interfere class kasi di ba nagtetest ka ng alcohol, so if you do not properly let it dry, it could contaminate the sample. Then specimen must be capped at all times. and you could refrigerate it up to 14 days. And for the preservative class, you could use sodium fluoride. Then what are the methods of measurement for alcohol? So we have your smaller gap. So smaller gap class is a screening test. So there is a need to do a follow-up test to confirm the diagnosis. So a smaller gap would measure the difference between measured and calculated osmolarity. Increased serum alcohol concentration would lead to an increased osmolarity. So kung mataas yung alcohol level mo, if you have a high alcohol level in your blood, it's most likely class you would also have increased osmolarity. So they would have a direct proportional or directly proportional, or they have a direct relationship. Now, the smaller gap class would lack analytical specificity. Thus, it is a screening test. So, lacking siya class, decrease ang specificity niya. And because of that, it could cause falsely erroneous result. They are not specific with ethanol. So, hindi siya ganun ka-specific class. It's not able to identify which type of alcohol. That's why you need to do a confirmatory test. Then increase a smaller gap can also be found in metabolic imbalances. Then we have your gas chromatography. So the gas chromatography naman class is the reference method. So here your specimen would be diluted with saturated concentration of sodium chloride. Headspace or volatiles within the liquid specimen or the partition in the air is used as a sample. So yung sinasabi dito na headspace class, this is the term for the space between the liquid. It is similar to when you open a lip gloss where there is a space in between the liquid. So kung ito yung tube nyo class, here you would find your serum. Tapos nandito yung sodium chloride. May makikita ka ditong space. Yan yung headspace. So you would measure that. Now the headspace is the one being measured because in this part of the specimen is where you would find gas. So nandito yung gas dyan sa headspace na yan. Since the method is gas chromatography, we are after the gas part. The liquid is not measured directly, but it is the headspace that is being measured. Simultaneously, class, it measures other alcohol species, which is why it is the reference method. Peaks are quantitated using a standard curve, and the standard curve is based on the relative changes in proportion to the internal standard. So the internal standard class is N-propanol. Then we have your enzymatic method. So enzymatic method is the most common method for alcohol determination. Uses non-human form of alcohol dehydrogenase. Produces a negative or low result with methanol or isopropanol. So yung reference method talaga dito class is yung gas chromatography. Ideal talaga siya when it comes to measuring alcohols. Then let's talk about so we're done with your alcohol. Let's go to the second part, yung caustic agents class. So what are caustic agents? So caustic agents class are technically poisonous to the body once ingested or inhaled. So we have your carbon monoxide, your cyanide, your metals, including arsenic, cadmium, lead, mercury, and we also have pesticides. So first, let's tackle your carbon monoxide. So carbon monoxide class is formed from the incomplete combustion of carbon-containing substances. It binds with heme protein and is rapidly absorbed in the circulation. So kapag ang carbon monoxide nyo, if you're familiar, if you still remember in your Hemo 1, if carbon monoxide mixes with your hemoglobin, it forms carboxyhemoglobin. Now, this carboxyhemoglobin class would have a higher affinity with hemoglobin and impairs oxygen transport. So, hindi makabind or hindi maka-attach yung oxygen dyan, causing a decreased oxygen level sa body natin. This could lead to hypertension and even neurologic changes. And the major toxic effect is tissue hypoxia. Again, kapag may carboxyhemoglobin ka, you are unable, or the oxygen is unable to attach to it. and this would lead to decreased oxygen level and leading to tissue hypoxia. Before class, this was used as a form of suicide wherein yung tao, itatrap nila yung sarili nila. Kaya nga yung mga driver class, there are cases before, if narinig nyo sa news, nakatulog yung patient or nakatulog yung driver sa sasakyan, namatay sila. The reason is kasi naka-on yung aircon. Tapos, because of that, yung aircon na yun, nag-i-emit siya ng carbon monoxide. Since close yung window, hindi nga na-absorb ngayon ng patient ay ng driver, and that could lead to death. And most of the time, this type of death class is painless. So natutulog lang yung driver, hindi niya na alam na patay na siya. Now, if oxygen being delivered to tissues is low, gradually the oxygen going to the brain will also decrease, and the rest of the body shuts down one by one. Indication of toxicity of this type of carbon monoxide is cherry red color of the face. Reference range class for non-smokers, it's 0.5%. For urban non-smokers, 1 to 2%. Then for smokers, 5 to 6%. And the toxic level, grade 20% in our body. Now, the method of measurement class for carbon monoxide. So we have your spot test. So spot test is wherein you would use, you would identify the cherry red appearance of carbohemoglobin. So 5 ml of 40% sodium hydroxide plus 5 ml of aqueous solution of your whole blood. So you would mix that class, and you would wait for the presence of a pink solution. So if your sample, your whole blood turns pink, it is consistent with carboxyhemoglobin greater than 20%. It is possible that if less than 20% carboxyhemoglobin is present, it cannot be detected. Then ang reference method niya class is gas chromatography. So in this reference method, you would use whole blood plus potassium ferricyanide to release carbon monoxide from hemoglobin. Then you would measure the changes in thermal conductivity. Then we have your spectrophotometry. This is the most common method. This is the basis of automated system. Measures spectral absorbency curve of different forms of hemoglobin, including carboxyhemoglobin. Introduction of other forms of hemoglobin could alter the result. Then let's go to your cyanide class. So cyanide class are components of insecticide and rodenticide. Leads to tissue and cellular hypoxia. Inhibits cellular respiration, electron transport, and ATP formation. So toxic effects class would include inhibition of electron transport, cell death. Indication of toxicity. So you would have an odor of bitter almonds breath. So yung hininga mo class, yung breath mo would smell like bitter almonds. Then the hallmark. So ang hallmark class ng cyanide toxicity is the odor of bitter almond. Then we have also altered mental status. So you're not able to act like yourself. Then toxic symptoms would include tachypnea or abnormal rapid breathing, convulsions, and coma. Toxic level class of cyanide is 2 microgram per ml. So familiar kayo dati class if you heard of the news, yung sa US, yung isang kulto. I forgot basta gumawa sila ng village. Then ang ginawa nung parang leader nila, Jonestown ata yung pangalan nung area na ginawa nila. So pumunta sila sa isang village, nagtayo sila ng village, then yung leader nila si Raulo, kumuha ng juice. And in the juice there was cyanide. So ang pinainom nila sa lahat ng member, then all of the members died. Now the measurement for cyanide class is spectrophotometry. So whole blood plus strong acid would form a hydrocyanic acid. Then hydrocyanic acid class, you would mix it with a strong base and would form a red complex. You would then measure the absorbance of the red complex. So absorbance is proportional to the concentration of cyanide. So to simplify dito class, kung mas red yung color, mas mataas yung amount ng cyanide sa blood mo, sa body mo. Then let's talk about the metals: arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury. So arsenic class. So this is found in ant poisons, rodenticides, paints, and metal alloy. It inhibits your sulfhydryl enzymes throughout the body. Has a high affinity to the thiol groups and protein. So by inhibiting this class, it would cause severe vomiting and disturbance in the blood circulation. So by inhibiting sulfhydryl compounds and even thiol groups, pwedeng mag-vomit yung patient and yung circulation niya affected. So indication of toxicity, you have the garlic odor, breath, and a metallic taste. So toxic effects would include intravascular hemolysis, hemoglobinemia, nephrotoxicity, and multi-organ involvement. So actual fatal dose class, if the type of arsenic is arsenic trioxide, it's 120 milligram. But if it's arsenic gas, it's 30 ppm. Then we have your cadmium class. So cadmium is used in electroplating and galvanizing. So galvanizing class is the act of coating in the process of welding. This could result from ingestion of acidic food stored or prepared in metal containers. So kung mahilig ka sa delata class and yung delata is already old, kinakalawang na siya, it could cause cadmium poisoning. So toxic effects would cause destruction of type 1 epithelial cells in the lungs, increased resistance to bacterial infection. So when people class are usually infected with or have cadmium toxicity, they are in their end stages. They are not usually not affected with MRSA. So resistant sila class sa MRSA. That's why yung mga that's why even hindi na siya apektuhan. Yung patient will no longer be affected with antibiotics. So the reference range is for blood 0 to 5 nanogram per ml, for urine 0 to 5 microgram per ml. Toxic lethal dose is 100 to 3,000 microgram per liter. So the reason bakit napaka-wide ng toxic lethal dose niya is because this is dependent on the person's tolerance. Then another indicator for cadmium toxicity or poisoning class is a positive GGT in the urine. Cadmium could accumulate in the kidney and lead to renal tubular damage. Then we have your lead. Now, lead class would inhibit enzymes. Nag-inhibit siya ng enzymes. One of the enzymes it inhibits is your delta aminolevulinic acid synthesis. So this is the precursor in the production of heme like cobalamins and chlorophylls. Then it would also inhibit your pyrimidine 5' nucleotidase and your sodium potassium ATPase, which is involved in glycolysis. Indication of toxicity is urinary aminolevulinic acid, free RBC porphyrins, presence of basophilic stippling in the RBC. Toxic effects would include anemia, diminished integrity of RBC membrane. RBCs would hemolyze easily. Could combine with the bone matrix class. Low levels may cause behavioral habits. So ang lead nyo class, if familiar kayo, they could be found in your pencils. So yung mga children, yung mga bata, if they continuously ingest yung kinakagat yung lapis class for a prolonged period of time, it could lead to lead poisoning. So toxic level is greater than 0.5 milligram per day. Fatal dose is 0.5 grams. Then peak level is greater than 50 microgram per DL. Then we have your mercury class. So mercury class is known to inhibit COMT. COMT class would stand for catecholamine O-methyl transferase. This is the enzyme for catecholamine degradation. So yung mga catecholamines nyo class would include dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. So kung may mercury poisoning ka class, you cannot synthesize or you cannot degrade dopamine, you cannot degrade norepinephrine, you cannot degrade epinephrine in the body. This would cause neurotransmission problems in the body. Now, si mercury class has an ability known or they could cause, or they could perform amalgamation, or they could amalgamate. Pag sinabi mong amalgamate, they are capable of binding or merging with other substances. So toxicity of mercury would include hypertension, tachycardia, sweating. Two forms of mercury class are the elemental and the alkyl. These forms are mercury combined with other forms of chemicals, usually methyl mercury. Reference range class is less than 10 microgram per dl, significant exposure 50, greater than 50 microgram per dl. Then we have the two types. So, di ba may two types, elemental and alkyl. So, kapag may, if you have a toxic effect, so here are the toxic effects of elemental mercury. You would have acrodynia and erythema. So, pag sinabi mong acrodynia class, you have pink discoloration of the body. While erythema class is known as Mad Hatter disease. So, common to class dati sa mga gumagawa ng sombrero. They would use mercury as a compound to cure felt. Ano ba tong felt na to? Felt class is somehow similar to your rheumatoid arthritis, but it would have splenomegaly and neutropenia. So malaki yung spleen mo, decrease ang neutrophils mo. People with erythema also have sensory overload. Example is when the hearing is so sensitive that the person flinches even just by hearing a small sound. Then yung alkyl type, so if you have a major toxic effect, the major toxic effect of alkyl mercury is your congenital Minamata disease. Now, Minamata disease class originated in Minamata, Japan. So, ang mga Japanese class, they like to eat raw fish. So, the fishes eaten by residents of Minamata were contaminated with methyl mercury, coming from chemicals that factories dump as waste into the oceans, seas, and etc. The fishes would ingest the methyl mercury, and once the fishes are eaten by the people, it would cause poisoning. Now, what are the methods of measurement of metal class? So we have your range test, your atomic emission spectroscopy, atomic absorption spectroscopy, and inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry. So sa range test class, you would use copper wire plus nitric acid solution plus your sample. So mixture is heated for 1 hour and there would be a subsequent addition of hydrochloric acid. The mixture is heated and there are time intervals where we add hydrochloric acid. After 1 hour, the copper is cooled and rinsed. So if there's a black plating of the copper wire after cooling and rinsing class, it indicates a positive result. The plating turned black class because the heavy metals can oxidize the elemental copper. Then we have your atomic emission spectroscopy. So liquid sample is converted into aerosol, so liquid to gas class. Then aerosol is delivered to the source where it would receive energy sufficient to emit radiation. Same lang siya with your excuse me, with your gas chromatography, wherein you would be measuring gas instead of the liquid. Emitted radiation is the basis for quantitation. Radiation is directly proportional to the concentration of the analyte. Then we have your atomic absorption spectroscopy, absorption of optical radiation by free atom in the gas phase. Absorption is directly proportional to the concentration of the analyte. The spectra of atoms are line spectra that are specific to the absorbing elements. Then certain molecular species may have absorption spectra that may overlap the spectra of the element of interest. And then we have your inductively coupled plasma mass spectroscopy. So dito class you would use an ionized gas, argon, measures mass to charge ratio of selected analyte ion, composed of an ion source, a mass analyzer, and ion detector. So the argon plasma would vaporize the droplets produced by the atomization of any molecular species. Thermally ionized ions are introduced to mass spectrometers. So here, the mass spectrometers, you would use quadruple mass spectrometer, and high resolution mass spectrometer. Then for the last one class is yung pesticides. So pesticides class are intentionally added into the environment to kill or harm an undesirable life form. So the most common configuration of pesticide is your organophosphates. Organophosphates class would inhibit ACEH or your acetyl cholinesterase. Ito yung responsible class for movement. It has a major role in our skeletal muscle contraction. The screening test is your serum cholinesterase. The confirmatory test is the erythrocytic cholinesterase. Reference range class is 4,000 to 12,000 U per liter. Symptoms of toxicity would include salivation, lacrimation or the tearing of the eye, and involuntary urination and defecation. Toxic effects would include bradycardia, muscular twitching, cramps, apathy, slurred speech, behavioral changes, and respiratory failure. Now, these are the cholinesterase assays class. We have your Michel method or the pH change. So, pH change is measured. This is a temperature sensitive test. When choline ester is hydrolyzed, a proton is released. pH is monitored by pH meter or electrometric titration. Then we have your Elman method or your colorimetric method. This is sensitive and rapid. Cholinesterase plus thiol ester would form thiolcholine. Cholinesterase binds with thiol ester to form thiolcholine. Thiolcholine plus diathiobis nitrobenzoic acid. Colored product class is measured at 410 nanometers. Then for the patient preparation, specimen type collection and storage for pesticide class, you could use serum, plasma, whole blood, urine, hair, and nails. So specimen must be collected carefully class. Collected at the proper site and the specimen is not contaminated. Specimen is collected in special sampling devices so as to prevent contamination and must be processed with water of high purity and specially clean glassware. Selection of needles, evacuated blood collection tubes, anticoagulants, other additives, reagents, pipettes, and sample cups must be carefully evaluated for use in trace and ultra trace analysis. Lab environment also must be carefully controlled. So that ends your toxicology class.